At my husband's funeral, my son Daniel stood at the podium, his voice shaking, and thanked another woman. He said she was the one who was truly family to us. In that instant, every eye in the room turned toward the woman in the front row, the one in the fitted dress and flawless makeup, with soft tears in her eyes. And me, the real wife, the mother. I sat quietly off to the side, unnoticed, almost invisible. Later, when the lawyer told me that my husband had left everything to her and not a single cent to me, Linda McAllister hugged my son and smiled that proud, victorious kind of smile. But then, I pulled out the second will, and just like that, not a single person in that room was smiling anymore. I never thought my life would start again at a funeral. Robert had died in a sudden car crash driving downtown one rainy morning. They said the brakes failed on a curve, and his car slammed into a supermarket. He died instantly. The doctor said he didn't suffer. But honestly, I wasn't sure he deserved such an easy death. We had been married for 40 years. I used to think our marriage wasn't romantic, but at least it was stable, like one of those old houses that survive storm after storm, worn down but still standing. I gave up my job to take care of our home. He always said, "I'll take care of you. You don't need to work." And I believed him. I thought that was love. At the memorial, I wore his favorite gray wool coat and stood at the chapel entrance greeting guests. The wind was cold, my fingers numb, but I kept smiling, doing my best to make sure his farewell was perfect. Robert always cared about appearances, about what people thought of him. Even in death, I found myself keeping that same image for him. Daniel was at the podium, our only child. He's turning 33 this year, and works as a back-end engineer at a tech company. He wore a sharp dark suit, his face serious, his voice steady. After reading his tribute to his father, he paused. His eyes turned red. "There's someone I want to give a special thank you to," Daniel said, his voice trembling slightly. The room went silent. I clutched my handbag tight, my knuckles pale. I thought he was going to say, "My mother." For a moment, I could almost hear it, that long-awaited recognition. 40 years of love, service, hospital visits, sacrifices. I thought he finally saw me. But what came next cut through me like a dull knife, stealing that hope bit by bit. Someone who supported my father through the hardest time of his life, Ms. Linda McAllister. A quiet murmur ran through the hall. From the front row, a woman stood up and wiped her tears, nodding softly. She wore a deep green coat, black heels, perfect makeup, and neatly styled hair. As she sat back down, people turned to look at her, surprised, curious. I heard the silence roar in my ears. Linda McAllister. I knew that name. She was Robert's assistant, the one he promoted to consulting partner, even put on the board for a while. Whenever I asked about her, he'd brush it off. "She's competent. Don't be paranoid," he'd say. I remembered that year's company party. She brought me wine, smiling sweetly, moving around like she belonged there. I thought she was just another polite employee. Looking back now, how wrong I was. From across the room, someone whispered, "She's sitting so close, like she's family." And my son had just thanked her at his father's funeral. I felt my body go numb, like the floor had vanished beneath me. People kept shaking my hand, saying, "He was a good man. We'll miss him." I nodded automatically, like a machine repeating lines it didn't mean. I had planned to hold it together till the end to keep the image. But then I heard Daniel whisper to Linda, "You're the one who's truly family." I almost dropped my teacup. Right then, I realized this funeral wasn't just for Robert. It was the burial of a life I never really knew. I was just a stranger, watching from the outside. That night, back home, I sat alone in the living room. When I took off the coat, I saw the satin ribbon was wrinkled, like the last piece of my marriage's pride had finally broken. I sat at the dining table and stared at the empty chairs. Robert's seat was still there, untouched. For decades, he always sat there, waiting for his soup. Now it was cold, empty. There were still bottles of his favorite beer in the fridge. I never liked it, too bitter. But he bought it every week, just for himself. Habit can be a cruel kind of prison. I couldn't sleep that night. I brought out the old photo albums. In those pictures, we were young, there was light in his eyes, and I was still smiling. I even found my old employee ID from when I worked as a financial consultant in his firm. Short hair, confident smile, always sitting second from the right in meetings. Then one day he told me, "You should quit. I'll take care of everything." And foolishly, I did. I closed the album, poured a glass of water, and listened to the ticking clock. That's when it hit me, all the patience, all the pride I poured into our marriage had died the moment he did. But what I didn't know was that there was still one last betrayal waiting for me. The next morning, in the lawyer's office, every word felt like part of a story I was never meant to read. The air smelled of ink and old wood. A faded print of the Constitution hung crooked on the wall, sunlight cutting through the blinds in narrow stripes. It was the law firm Robert had chosen before his death. The lawyer, a man in his 50s, spoke slowly, his voice heavy. "According to the will signed by Mr. Robert DeSmith 3 years ago," he began, "most of his assets, including the main house in Summerball, the vacation home in Nantucket, and his remaining bank accounts shall be inherited by Ms. Linda McAllister." I wasn't just shocked, I felt like I'd been thrown off the main stage of my own life, left behind the curtain under a dead spotlight, wondering if I had ever really belonged there. I turned to look at Daniel. He sat straight and stiff, staring ahead like he was listening to a boring office report. His hands were neatly folded. No surprise, no emotion, as if he'd known everything all along. When the will reading ended, I stood up and walked over to him. "You knew," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Didn't you?" He looked at me calmly. "Dad had his reasons." "His reasons," I repeated, barely able to breathe. 40 years of marriage, what did that mean to him then? Daniel stayed silent for a moment, then said softly, "He worked hard all his life. Linda was there for him. She understood him." He lowered his voice even more. "You didn't." That was the moment I realized I hadn't just lost my husband. I was losing my son too. He wasn't defending his father's memory. He was rewriting our family story and erasing me completely. When I got home, I stood in the driveway for what felt like forever, my handbag heavy on my arm. In the bedroom, I opened Robert's closet. His shirts, ties, and wool vests were all still neatly arranged, carrying that familiar clean scent. But suddenly, I wondered what lies were hidden in those fibers. When did he decide I was no longer part of his family? Was it that year I forgot to buy his favorite wine for our anniversary? Or earlier, when I quit my job as his financial consultant to become a housewife? I started searching through drawers, desperate for proof I wasn't imagining things, old ledgers, receipts, photos, business cards. Then in the kitchen drawer, I found a folder of letters he'd kept. One was from a property management company in Nantucket. The date was 6 years ago. The recipient, Linda. My hands shook. I'd been to that beach house so many times, never realizing I was just a visitor there. That afternoon, I crossed the street to see Giselle, our elderly neighbor, a widow with sharp memory and a garden full of roses. When I mentioned Linda's name, her face changed. "Linda? Wasn't she the one Robert always took to those symphonies?" she asked, lifting an eyebrow. "You didn't go with them?" I forced a smile. I never liked social events much. My mouth was dry. Giselle frowned a little. "Oh, I always thought they were together. She's been here plenty of times. One Christmas, she even helped Robert hang the lights." I froze. That Christmas, I'd been upstairs with a swollen knee. Robert had told me a neighborhood boy helped him. "Do you remember when they started getting close?" I asked. Giselle stirred her tea, thinking. "At least 10, maybe 15 years ago. I remember seeing her around when you went to take care of your sister. I thought she was some cousin or something." 15 years. I sat there in Giselle's bright sunroom, feeling like a stranger in my own story. All these years, I'd managed our retirement savings, paid the bills, chose his clothes, scheduled his checkups, even used my parents' last savings to keep his company afloat during a crisis. And all the while, he'd been quietly building a future with another woman with my sacrifices. Back home, I finally found an old cardboard box in the basement filled with photos. There was Robert smiling beside Linda at a company event. His hand rested lightly on her arm. He looked younger, happier than he ever did beside me. And there Daniel, maybe 18 or 19, standing next to them. His smile looked a bit nervous, but not unwilling. One corner of the photo was darkened. I rubbed it gently and found a line written in pen. "Our little family will be official one day." Something inside me cracked, not my heart, not glass, but something deeper. Trust. And it would never heal again. That night, I lit a candle in the kitchen. For the first time since Robert's death, I played soft, slow jazz. And as the music filled the room, I wondered maybe I had lived my whole life to his rhythm, never my own. But not anymore. From now on, the music, the rhythm, the dance steps, they're mine to choose. I thought the worst was behind me. The will, the betrayal, Linda at the center of everything. That humiliation felt like enough for a lifetime. But I was wrong. What truly broke me was Daniel. He was my only child. I always believed that no matter what happened, he would still be mine. We met at the small-town cafe, the one he used to love as a boy for its caramel desserts. He arrived wearing a trench coat, looking stiff and distant like he was heading into an interview, not meeting his mother. Before I could even sit down, he placed his phone face down on the table, a silent message that any notification could end our talk. "Why did you send Linda a legal notice?" he asked bluntly. I took a slow breath and looked him in the eyes. "Do you think I shouldn't have?" He shrugged. "She didn't hurt you. Dad gave her that money. It was his choice. Suing her just makes things uncomfortable." Uncomfortable. I repeated, my voice breaking. "Daniel, your father lied to me for decades. I gave up my job, my friends, everything for this family. I even sold my mother's emerald ring to pay for your college. Do you even know what that ring meant to me?" Daniel sighed, clearly annoyed. "You always bring that up, Mom. Like I owe you something." It hit me not like anger, but like a slow, heavy ache. He wasn't arguing. He was just gone. Distant. After a pause, he said quietly, "Dad told me once that the happiest years of his life were with Linda. She understood him. She respected him. She didn't always question him like you did." "I questioned him," I said firmly, "because he stopped respecting me." Daniel shook his head. "You've always been too traditional. You think sacrifice equals love. But Dad didn't need that kind of love." That's when I realized this wasn't new to him. He'd been thinking this way for a long time. He just hadn't said it aloud until now. I looked at him, and all I could see was the boy I once knew, the boy I held during long asthma nights, the teenager I defended when he was bullied, the heartbroken 17-year-old who sat beside me in silence under the stars. Did he remember any of that? I reached into my purse and pulled out an old photo. "Remember this?" I said, sliding it toward him. It was from when he was 2, at the beach. His father had canceled last minute, so it was just the two of us. In the picture, he's wearing bright red swim trunks, tiny footprints behind him in the sand. He clung to my neck, crying, "Mommy! Mommy!" every time the waves came close. He didn't say a word. "I know you look up to your father," I said softly. "He was charming, polished, always composed. But did you ever wonder who helped him become that man? Who kept things steady while he shined?" He finally looked up. No tears, no guilt, just a flicker of hesitation. "Dad did what made him happy," he said quietly. "Linda made him feel needed. You were just too strong." Too strong. I thought of all the nights I stayed up fixing finances, the days I cooked through fevers, the years I swallowed pain and smiled anyway. So that's what being too strong meant. I put the photo back in my wallet and stood up. My voice was calm but firm. "You're right. I was too strong. And from today, I'll use that strength for myself." Whatever he said after that, I didn't hear. I walked out into the rain. The drops hit the car windshield like a quiet rhythm, like music made of silence. I sat in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel. I didn't cry. I didn't break. I just sat there, realizing what I had truly lost wasn't just a husband, it was my marriage, my family, and even my son. But in that same moment, I also realized something else. I couldn't wait for anyone to define me anymore. It was time to start living for me. At first, I thought Linda was just an accident, a late-life mistake, a woman who slipped into Robert's world by chance. But now, I saw the truth. She had planned it all. One rainy afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table, hands around a mug of cold coffee, scrolling through Linda's public Facebook profile. Her profile photo showed her on a beach, smiling sweetly, with the background blurred just enough to hide the truth. Her bio read, "Consultant in architecture, lover of classical music and community service, grateful for life's tender company. I opened her photo albums. The first picture showed Robert sitting in a wicker chair, holding a slice of lemon pie she'd made for him. The caption read, "His smile is my favorite reward." The date: 6 years ago, the same year I was bedridden with arthritis. Back then, Robert had told me work was hectic and he'd be traveling a lot. I believed him. I thought he just didn't want to deal with my illness. But now I knew he wasn't avoiding me. He was living another life. I kept scrolling photos of him wearing the wool jacket I'd gifted him, helping her plant flowers, arranging bonsai in her garden. Then a video started playing, Robert toasting her with a Christmas song in the background. And there, in the corner, Daniel. My heart sank. He looked younger, still in college, hair longer, smiling shyly. Linda had her arm around him, laughing, saying, "Your dad should be proud of you." That's when it hit me. Linda wasn't a secret. She had been building her place in our family for years. And I was the one she meant to replace. I picked up the phone and called Ruth. Ruth Lanier had been my colleague back in the firm. One of the few friends I'd kept after quitting. Now semi-retired, she helped her daughter with a grandchild and took the occasional freelance case. She answered on the second ring, full of her usual warmth. "Maggie, my goodness. I heard about Robert. I've been meaning to call." "Thank you," I said softly. Then I took a breath. "Ruth, I need your help finding something." Without hesitation, she said, "Tell me what you suspect." I spoke slowly, every word sharp and certain. "I believe Robert used company funds, for at least the past 10 years, to buy properties for Linda. And there may be other transactions we haven't seen yet." Ruth went quiet. "You're not just trying to fix a marriage, Maggie. You're about to uncover fraud." "I want the truth," I said. "I've lived in the dark for too long." We agreed to meet at her house in 2 days. Meanwhile, I turned into a woman on a mission. I went to the local library and checked Linda's property records in Summer Ball. One house, a single-family villa, was under her name. Purchase date: 5 years ago. It was right at the end of the company's employee housing benefits project, the one Robert was running. I had visited during that project. I remember joking, "Next trip, take me too." He dodged it. "You wouldn't like it there." Now I understood. That room wasn't for clients. It was for her. 2 days later, I drove to Ruth's house. She lived in a quiet suburb, a pale gray bungalow with a row of fading chrysanthemums out front. She welcomed me with lemon tea and opened her laptop. "I checked some archived payment records," she said, scrolling through 3 entries labeled outside consulting support. "But the company getting the money is a shell. No real office listed." She zoomed in on a line. $50,000 paid the same month you were home recovering from surgery. My stomach twisted. Ruth peered at me over her glasses. "Are you sure you want to do this? Most people would rather let it go." I didn't answer. I saved a screenshot to my flash drive. Driving home, I went slowly. The sun hit the windshield hard, and the air smelled like early autumn. The radio played an old 60s ballad. The chorus kept repeating softly, "You only find the truth when you stop pretending. Only when you stop pretending do you begin to see clearly." Back home, I sat at the computer and saved Linda's Facebook photos into a new folder. I named it Evidence. I wasn't the woman who hid her feelings behind a stove anymore. I was Maggie Smith, Robert's legal wife, Daniel's mother, the woman edited out of her own life, and I was about to rewrite the ending. Sunlight came through the blinds, laying neat stripes on the counter. I paused with a rag in my hand and thought. That's how I kept my marriage tidy, quiet until the kitchen didn't feel like mine anymore. An email arrived with a simple subject line, 3 suspicious transactions. Key, preliminary legal feasibility assessment. I opened it. The screen filled with statements. Ruth had added notes. Company name, Kint Consulting, LLC. Account tied to Linda. Transfers, 3 payments totaling over $350,000, spread over 5 years, each one time just outside the company's official audit windows. She added, "This is potentially a fraudulent gift." There it was, the proof. A hard knot of resolve formed in my chest. I knew what to do. That afternoon, I called a lawyer who specialized in fraud and corporate law. "I have a lot of questions," I said, my voice steady and clear. I believed my late husband was in his mid-50s. Her voice on the phone was warm and no nonsense. She listened calmly while I explained. You need to send me everything you have, she said. Every document, every email, every photo. I hung up and started copying files. When I finished, I had over 50 documents. I printed them, stacked them neatly, and waited. When she arrived, she had a kind, professional smile. Her sharp haircut framed her chin, and her suit fit perfectly. She took the folder, flipped through, and nodded. We'll go through this, she said. I'll be in touch. Thank you, I said, looking at her. She betrayed me. The next few months were a blur of meetings, emails, and legal steps. We filed a lawsuit against Linda McAllister, and the case made noise. Robert's old firm, his lawyer, even his estate got pulled in. Then there was Daniel. He took Linda's side. He was furious. You're destroying his memory, he told me over the phone. The con man who used money to betray me, his wife, and his son's mother, that's the truth, I said. He hung up. I waited for him to call back. He didn't. It hurt, but I moved forward. I had to. The case went to court. Linda and her lawyer tried to spin it as a misunderstanding. They said the payments were legitimate and just happened that way. I spoke about our 40 years of marriage, the sacrifices I made for him and for Daniel, and the pain of learning the truth. The judge, a black woman in her mid-60s, looked at me with understanding. I think she knew the hearts of women like me. In the end, the judge ruled for us. Linda had to sell the properties bought with the stolen money. She was broke. She lost her job and her reputation. I never saw her again. As for Daniel, he didn't speak to me for years. Then when my father died, he called. We met at the funeral and hugged. We started seeing each other again. I told him the whole story, and he began to understand. It took years, but he realized he'd been seeing an illusion all along. I hugged him and told him I'd believed in him the whole time. And in that moment, many eyes were full of tears. Daniel came over and hugged me gently. Mom, he said with a smile, when did you get so good at giving speeches? I smiled back. I always was. You just weren't listening. I planted this 20 years ago. Last year, it almost died, I said. I almost cut it down, but this spring it bloomed earlier than ever, and it's still blooming. The women chuckled. I added, even she knew you don't give up on what's still alive. That night, after everyone left, I folded the chairs by the maple tree at the end of the street, as if to ask, who are you really? I took off my heels, walked barefoot inside, hung up my dress, and went to bed. I knew who I was. I was a survivor, a fighter, and the truth had set me free.